Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Today we turn our attentions to the not so humble steam tank, and we ask the question, is this an automatic include in an Empire of Man army for Warhammer The Old World? Now from my perspective, when I first started collecting the Empire for the current version of the game, I was very reluctant to get a steam tank involved. It didn't fit in with the narrative that I wanted to tell. But I did find very quickly that the idea I had for a narrative, while it created a great story, it didn't create an army that was effective enough to perform on the battlefield, particularly with the idea of taking this army to an event. So I did try out a steam tank. It is part of a number of my lists, and I thought I'd just recount some of my experiences with it and my thinking around this unit. So what does the steam tank do? I think it performs two key functions. The first of these is a mobile artillery platform, and the second one is a unit designed to hold ground. Let's look at each of these in turn. So, mobile artillery platform. Now, without any upgrades, the steam tank has two ranged weapons of note. It's got a breath weapon and it's got its steam cannon. Now, I'll be honest, I don't think the breath weapon does an awful lot. It's very close range, and if you're getting that close to a unit, you're probably going to prefer to charge it. Yes, it can do something, but I'm not seeing a lot of use out of it myself. But I do seem to get a bit more value out of the steam cannon. And I think being able to move an artillery piece around the board and being able to shoot it at better angles is a real valuable thing, particularly if the enemy are particularly good at blocking angles or they're denying you line of sight to the point you want to target on the table with your great cannon. Now there are some disadvantages. We're talking about a cannon rather than a great cannon, and that means a shorter range and less damage. Now the shorter range isn't that much of a problem. It's still 24 inches, and then you've got bounces and stuff, plus you of course can move the steam tank a lot more easily than you can other forms of artillery. But the less damage is probably the key thing here. In my experience, the D3 plus 1 damage you get from a successful wound caused by a great cannon is actually far more valuable than the D3 from a steam cannon or a normal cannon. Why is this? Well, often ranged weapons which can hurt your steam tank, so enemy artillery effectively, will generally have 3 wounds. A steam cannon is going to take one of those out, rolling a 5 or a 6 on a D6 or 3 on a D3 when looking to inflict wounds. You've got a 1 in 3 chance of doing that. Whereas a great cannon only needs a 3 up. It's twice as likely to get that 3 wounds required to take an enemy artillery piece off the table. And that can be hugely valuable. And I've seen it as incoming fire at my artillery, where fighting against dwarf cannons, they do struggle to take great cannons off in one shot, whereas they're far more likely to be removed by my great cannon, making them quite effective anti-battery, counter-battery fire options. And just to really reflect on this movement for a second longer, being able to move around not only means targets that may be otherwise obscured become available, but you can really get around and threaten people's flanks, even if you've got units you don't really want to throw your steam tank into combat with. If you're getting a flank shot, you're likely to be getting a lot more people, enemy models, struck by that cannonball, and that's particularly true if you're playing against a line hammer type opponent. Now from this front as well, I don't think the steam tank really has a peer when it comes to the list of available options for an Empire army. Sure, you can have a wizard on a Pegasus flying around and doing magic missiles, but you don't really have mobile heavy artillery options elsewhere in the list. So it's doing something here which I don't think you really find anywhere else. And that uniqueness, I think, is a real selling point. Let's turn our attention though to the second purpose of a steam tank, holding ground. So you've got this thing, it's unbreakable, it's immune to psychology, it causes terror itself, toughness 7, 10 wounds. This thing is hard to shift and it can tie up even elite troops for several rounds. It's real pain to get rid of, and it can really hamper your opponent's mobility when this thing comes crashing in or just sits there and gets in the way. Now, whilst its stats are quite good, its stomp attacks are really useful if you're not fighting a bear moth, I do think that the steam tank needs a little bit of help. Sure, if it's just holding up some enemy and that's all you want from it, fine, you can probably leave it to its own devices. But if you want it to break through, if you want it to get through that first combat and then go on to do some more damage, I think it needs some help. And I found that the steam tank does combo really nicely with Empire Knights. Once your enemy unit is gummed up with the steam tank, and at best it's going to give ground and then you're going to carry on bashing away at each other, this allows Knights to get in a charge, and even if they're pushed back, fall back in good order, something like that, they will have a chance to go again and again because that steam tank is keeping your enemy force clogged up. And it also, by clogging them up, gives the Knights time to try and get into a flanking position and make their charge even more devastating. And that's before, as I say, we take into account the damage the steam tank does. The stomps are pretty good if you get some impact hits as well. It can do some pretty effective damage, and it's something I think your opponent just isn't going to want to ignore. It's going to have to do something to deal with that steam tank. Now, unlike a mobile shooting platform, the steam tank does have rivals for the gum up part of the table job. And the obvious thing here to point to is flagellants. They're also unbreakable. Their flails can do a bit of damage in the first round of combat, and they are moving in a more reliable way. The steam tank doesn't march as a normal thing, so there's always a risk it's not going to move at all, or it's going to move very slowly. But I think the flagellants suffer from their low toughness and their poor saves, really relying on that 6-up ward save most of the time and only being toughness 3. This means that they are prone to being cut down in droves in close combat, particularly if they don't get the charge, and they can be baited out to make them really standing in a position that you don't want them to be in. And then, of course, shooting can also carve them to pieces. That toughness 3 6-up ward isn't going to help them very long under a shower of small arms fire or archery or anything like that. They are going to start dropping, and once their numbers start to go, yes, you've got to wipe them out, but you're going to have to invest a lot of points in that unit to keep it hanging around for any length of time. So I think just for being able to dish out some damage back, hold its ground effectively, and not just disintegrate under severe pressure, the steam tank is probably looking at the better option. Now, the steam tank, we've got to be honest, doesn't come cheap. It's 265 points without any of the upgrades. It's a big investment, and in a standard 2,000 point game, you can only have one of them. And as we've already mentioned, its movement is unreliable. You can't reliably march with it. You've got to roll to see how far it moves, and it's a chance it'll either injure itself or not move at all, possibly doing both. So using a steam tank, I think it does take a little bit of getting used to. And my first couple of games, I didn't get an awful lot of value out of it. However, I have now increasingly found that even in games where it doesn't do 265 plus points worth of damage, as a nuisance factor and as a factor for taking my opponents off their game, it's been really, really valuable. And that mobile artillery piece, I can drive around a corner and start letting rip at things, really gives me some extra options, forcing my opponent to react to me And anything that gives you an extra dimension, I think, is hugely valuable for an Empire army. Particularly one that, at the moment, as the books currently stand, definitely seems to be struggling in the current matter. So there we have it, the steam tank. Is it something that every army of the Empire needs to include? I think if you're looking to be competitive, then the answer to that, unfortunately, is probably yes. You just need to suck it up and get a hold of one of these things. But of course, my experience may be varying from yours. So have you got experiences either fighting against or with a steam tank? Do let me know in the comments below. How have you found it? Has it been useful? Had it really added to the strength of an Empire army? As I say, do let me know. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this video and others like it, do consider dropping a subscribe. It's the best way of helping a small channel such as this one, along with giving a few minutes of your time just to watch the videos. Once again, thank you very much for watching. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.